Husayn ibn Ali leaves Mecca. The Umayyad governor of Mecca tried to stop Husayn ibn Ali and his small party, which was mostly his family members. He tried to stop them from leaving Mecca. However, the governor didn't have the manpower to restrain Hussein and the men with him. Most of the men with him were his family members, as we'll talk about right now. So Hussein was traveling with 6 of his brothers. All of them were his half-brothers. His only full-blooded brother, both same mother and same father, was Husayn ibn Ali, and Husayn had already died. So these were his 6 living half-brothers. They all share the same father, that is, of course, Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu anhu, and he had multiple wives after Fatima died. And he also had some concubines as well. The man was a caliph, okay? Anyway, so Ali ibn Abi Talib had multiple children after Fatima radiallahu anha died. 3 of Hussein's sons were also with him. Now, interestingly, all of Hussein's sons were named Ali. Now, they had like middle names and like nicknames to separate them, but all of them were named Ali. So he had one son called Ali the Elder, Ali al-Akbar. Another one was Ali the Middle, but he was known as Zain al-Abidin. And then finally, the youngest one was just a baby, not even a year old yet. That was Ali al-Asghar, Ali the Younger. So Ali the Older was just old enough to fight. However, the middle son, Zain al-Abidin, Ali the Middle, he was just barely 15. And as we mentioned, Ali al-Asghar, the youngest one, was not even a year old just yet. Also along with Hussein were his nephews. He had several nephews and cousins that had come along as well. We'll go through many of them, not all of them, not one by one, not all their names, but just so you can understand and get an idea of the size of the group that was traveling with Hussein from Mecca on to Kufa. 3 of his brother Hassan's sons, so these would have been his nephews, Hussein's nephews that is. 3 of his brother Hassan's sons and 2 sons from his uncle Abbas were also with him. So these would have been brothers or half-brothers of the famous companion Ibn Abbas. As we mentioned in the previous episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago, I don't remember when, Abbas was the uncle of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as Ali ibn Abi Talib. So these would have been the sons of Abbas and the brothers and half-brothers of Ibn Abbas. Also, Muslim ibn Aqil, that was Hussein's cousin that had traveled to Kufa to lay the groundwork, and things didn't quite work out, and he wound up being executed by the governor of Kufa, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. We discussed all that in the previous episode. Muslim ibn Aqil, several of his male family members were also traveling with Husayn ibn Ali. So there were 3 brothers of Muslim ibn Aqil, also Muslim ibn Aqil's son, as well as Muslim ibn Aqil's nephew. So that's at least 4 members from Muslim ibn Aqil's family. And remember, Muslim ibn Aqil was Husayn ibn Ali's cousin. And then there was also Hussein's sister Zainab. She was traveling, but the men that were traveling with her were her husband Abdullah and their 3 sons as well. Now, so those are the closest family members from Banu Hashim who were traveling with Husayn ibn Ali. But there are more people beyond, more men just beyond that. There are also Hussein's Mawali. We mentioned the Mawali before. The Mawali were freed slaves of people. Singular is Mawla. Freed slaves who remained connected to the family. I don't want to get it twisted. I don't want to go into it again. This was not like indentured servitude or anything. This was more like a family loyalty. If you're only looking at slavery from the Western perspective, it would be very difficult to understand, but it just wasn't the same thing. These Mawali were kind of like family members. Not quite family members, but there was a sort of loyalty and kinship similar to family members, where these Mawali could depend on the Arab family for help. They could depend on them for resources and support. And at the same time, the family, that is the larger family, could depend on the Mawla or the Mawali for the same thing. It's not complicated, but I just have the feeling that people who are stuck with the Western mindset of slavery as it was practiced in the United States and the Caribbean and South America will have a very distorted view and think of this as something really negative, when in fact it's actually a very positive thing. Moving on then. So we have 3 of Hussein's Mawali who were traveling with him as well. So these Mawali, they weren't related to Hussein by blood. They're connected by bonds of mutual support is the best way that I can put it. Dozens of other people had also left Mecca with Hussein. These are just Shia to Ali, partisans of Ali, people who supported Ali and therefore now supported Husayn ibn Ali. They left along with him. They weren't necessarily family members. They weren't from among his Mawali, but they supported the cause of Husayn ibn Ali. And so they also left Mecca with him and they joined him on the journey. And even as Hussein was traveling, as he was traveling to Kufa from Mecca, people would join his group as well. Not a whole lot, but still, people would join his group. So Hussein's group numbered roughly about 150. That's both men, women, and children. And as he was traveling, people would join him along the way. Now, during Hussein's journey to Iraq, he stopped at a place called Asifa, which was just northeast of Mecca. And while he was there, he met the famous poet Farazdak, also known as the Dumpling. We first introduced and mentioned Farazdak, aka the Dumpling, in episode 3 of this season of the Islamic History podcast. Hussein knew that Farazdak was from Kufa, and so he asked him about the sentiments of the people of Kufa. And Farazdak responded with a line of poetry that translates to, "Their hearts are with you, but their swords are with Banu Umayyad. The decree will come from heaven, and Allah will do as he wishes." So Hussein seems to have understood what Farazdak means. If we try to break it down, it seems as if Farazdak was telling Husayn ibn Ali that the people of Kufa were with him emotionally. Their intentions was to join him. However, their weapons, physically, they were with Banu Umayyad. And that ultimately Allah will make the final decision. For whatever reason, if Hussein understood it that same way, Allah knows best if he did, he accepted it and he continued on with the journey. On the 11th day of his journey, Hussein sent a man named Qais ibn Mushir ahead of him to go to Kufa. We have mentioned Qais ibn Mushir in the previous episode. Qais ibn Mushir had delivered the letter from Muslim ibn Aqil's initial letter to Hussein in Mecca. That's when things were going good for the Sharia. That's when Muslim ibn Aqil said he had 18,000 people, 12,000 people pledged to Husayn ibn Ali. And so it seemed as if the sentiment in Kufa was ripe and ready for Husayn ibn Ali to come and join them and lead the people of Kufa against the Umayyads. And so Muslim ibn Aqil, he wrote the letter and he sent it with Qais ibn Mushir to give this good news to Husayn ibn Ali. And that is what got Husayn ibn Ali on this journey going towards Kufa in the first place. So now that they're traveling, Husayn ibn Ali, he wants to send word back to Muslim ibn Aqil. He hadn't heard anything from Muslim ibn Aqil since he received that letter. It's been at least 2 weeks now since he received that letter. So he's sending Qais ibn Mushir, who could now move much faster because he's not traveling with a bunch of children and women and soldiers and a big crowd and everything. Hussein's letter to Muslim ibn Aqil was just letting him know that they were on the way. Now, as he mentioned, none of them, not Hussein, not Qais ibn Mushir, none of them knew that Muslim ibn Aqil was now dead. Husayn ibn Ali was absolutely unaware of the current situation. Nonetheless, so Qais ibn Mushir, he goes on ahead to deliver Hussein's letter. Meanwhile, Husayn ibn Ali, he's still traveling. So after another 2 weeks of traveling towards Iraq, he hadn't heard anything back from Qais ibn Mushir. He expected Qais ibn Mushir to get there quickly, get a response from Muslim ibn Aqil, and bring the message back. So Hussein decides to send another messenger to Kufa to find out what happened with Qais ibn Mushir and try to figure out what was going on. And this time he sent one of his Mawali, a Mawla named Abdullah ibn Yaqtur. So now that they were getting much closer to Kufa, they had been traveling for 2 weeks since he had sent Qais ibn Mushir. They were even closer now to Iraq, closer to Kufa. Hussein expected Abdullah ibn Yaqtur, that is the Mawla, he expected Abdullah ibn Yaqtur to return much quicker. But another week went by and there was still no response. Qais ibn Mushir and Abdullah ibn Yaqtur. There was a reason why Husayn ibn Ali did not receive any response from his two messengers. The Umayyad army, which was being led by Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas at the behest and the request of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the governor of Iraq, the viceroy of Iraq, and the governor of Basra and Kufa, the Umayyad army had arrested Qais ibn Mushir just as he neared Kufa. The Umayyads had blocked all the roads to Kufa, and they were on the lookout because, again, after the failed rebellion in Kufa that was being led by Muslim ibn Aqil, they had captured many people, they had interrogated. So once again, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad was well aware that Husayn ibn Ali was on his way. And so they had soldiers, guards, lookouts all along the roads waiting for strangers coming into Kufa. Not even strangers, just waiting for anybody to come into Kufa and figure out what was happening. So Qais ibn Mushir, as he was getting closer to Kufa, they recognized him. He was originally from Kufa. Remember, Muslim ibn Aqil had sent him from Kufa to Mecca to give the initial good news to Husayn ibn Ali. Everyone knew that Qais ibn Mushir was from amongst the Shia to Ali. He was a Shiite. He was a partisan of Ali. So when he was coming into Kufa, the soldiers arrested him and they took him to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad questioned him and quickly discovered that Qais ibn Mushir was indeed a messenger from Husayn ibn Ali. So Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, he gives Qais ibn Mushir a chance. He gives him a chance to save his life. He tells Qais ibn Mushir that he would set him free if he publicly praised the Caliph Yazid ibn Muawiyah and renounced Husayn ibn Ali and his father Ali ibn Abi Talib. Well, Qais ibn Mushir, he agrees. And so they take him to the roof of the governor's palace. And they want him to shout out to the crowd below exactly what Ubaydullah had told him before, that he supports and he praises the Caliph, Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and that he renounces and denounces Hussein and his father. But instead of doing that, instead of praising Yazid ibn Muawiyah to the crowd that gathered around the palace, Qais ibn Mushir shouted at the top of his lungs that Husayn ibn Ali was coming. And then he began to insult Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, calling him the son of a man who took the name of another man's father. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, of course, flipped out. He was very angry. He ordered his soldiers to kill him. And so they took Qais ibn Mushir and just threw him off the roof of the palace. And that wound up killing Hussein's first messenger, Qais ibn Mushir. A similar thing happened to Hussein's second messenger, the Mawla, Abdullah ibn Yaqtur. However, once they threw Abdullah ibn Yaqtur off the roof of the palace, he didn't die right away. So as he lay on the ground with most likely most of his bones were almost certainly broken after having been thrown off the roof, one of the soldiers came to the Mawla and slit his throat. So Husayn ibn Ali, he's completely unaware that these things have happened, and so he continues on his march towards Kufa, unaware of the way things are going and the hornet's nest he's about to walk into. Hussein learns the truth. So Hussein and his group had been traveling for a long time, several weeks by now, roughly about a month or so, maybe a month and a half. And they're starting to feel the difficulties of traveling such a long distance from Mecca to Iraq. Remember, they're traveling on foot. They have camels and everything, but they're traveling together as a group. So even though they have camels, and the camels are mostly for carrying the loads and stuff, carrying the packages and bags and stuff like that, the luggage and stuff. So most of the walking is done by foot. And also they're traveling with women and children. And I hate to say it, but civilians kind of slow things down, especially kids. I'm not saying the women slow you down necessarily, but yeah, they can. Okay. All of us who've gone shopping with our wives, we know that they can slow us down sometimes. Be that as it may, the truth of the matter is that yes, they were being slowed down by people. This was not a military possession. This was, this is a family. This was mostly family moving. As they were traveling, they were starting to run out of water and food. And eventually they had to resort to slaughtering one of their camels. But this was a risky move. Of course, you're traveling through the desert. the camel is a necessity. It is a necessity for travel and moving things along. You just can't go around slaughtering all your camels while you're traveling through the desert. That is a recipe for disaster. Traveling through the desert at this point in time without a camel was just about impossible. So when they slaughtered a camel, this was a calculated risk that they just had to take because that's how difficult the journey had become at this time. Now, as we mentioned earlier, Hussein's small group had grown over time. Throughout this journey, it had grown with people who supported him and whom he passed along the road just joining with him. Now, some of these newcomers were just opportunists. They just wanted to see how things turned out. Maybe they could cash in if Hussein's rebellion was successful. But many of them were also sincere. For instance, there was a man named Zuhayr ibn Al-Qayn. He had followed Hussein out of Mecca. He had joined Hussein from around the vicinity of Mecca. He was on his way to make Hajj, or he had just completed making Hajj, one or the other. I believe he had just completed making Hajj. So while Hussein was traveling, whenever Hussein stopped, Zuhayr and his family, who were just leaving from Mecca having made Hajj, they would stop as well, but they maintained a respectful distance from Hussein and his party because they weren't officially part of his group. Zuhayr ibn Al-Qayn and his family would remain like maybe half a mile or so, or maybe a quarter of a mile or so away from Hussein, like staying just further down the road, just out of respect. Hussein eventually realized that this man and his family were following him, and Hussein invited Zuhayr to join him officially, become part of his official group. Zuhayr said yes, he wanted to join, but he didn't want his family to suffer. So he immediately divorced his wife and sent her home with her children, and he went ahead and joined Husayn ibn Ali and his group. So after another 3 weeks of traveling, Hussein now is finally starting to get some information from Kufa. They were set up at a camp at a place called Zubala, which is about 190 miles south of Kufa and what is now northeastern Saudi Arabia. 2 young men from the Asad tribe, they approached Hussein, and they happened to be related to one of the shurta, one of the policemen, one of Ubaidullah's policemen in Kufa. And they had learned, and they gave this information to Husayn ibn Ali. They informed Hussein that Muslim ibn Aqil and Hani ibn Urwa had been executed by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And this changed everything within Hussein's group. This is when they knew the attitude, the atmosphere, everything in Kufa had changed. And now he understands now that he's walking into danger. So Hussein, he realizes what's going on. So he asks his family, he gathers the men of his family, if they want to continue on to Kufa. The thing is that Muslim ibn Aqil's relatives, his sons and his brothers, they were also in Hussein's group, and now they are angry, they are saddened that their relative, their father, their brother had been killed, and only thing on their mind is revenge. They insist that they want to avenge Muslim ibn Aqil's death, and they insist that they have to continue. And so with that, Hussein agrees, and the party continues on with their journey. The following day, they traveled a few more miles before stopping at a waterhole. At that waterhole, they meet a Bedouin, and the Bedouin informs Husayn ibn Ali what he probably already knew, or at least suspected. They informed Husayn ibn Ali that Qais ibn Mushir and the Mawla Abdullah ibn Yaqtur had been captured and executed. And now, whatever doubts Hussein may have had, whatever unanswered questions he may have had before, he has to know it now. If these 2 guys, his 2 messengers, had been executed, he knows that there is no hope for him in Kufa. He knows that now. So with hearing this news, Hussein gathers his party, his family members, the men, the women, the mawla, everybody. He gathers them and he says the following. This is quoted from Tariq al-Tabari. The dreadful news of the murder of Muslim ibn Aqil, Hani ibn Urwa, and Abdullah ibn Yaqtur has reached us. Our Sharia in Kufa have deserted us. Many of you joined me because you thought, as I did, that Kufa would welcome us and we'd have a chance at victory. But as it turns out, that will not be the case. It is very likely that if you continue with me, you may face death. Therefore, Any of you who would like to return home, you may do so and be free of any guilt. Well, many of those who had just joined Husayn ibn Ali and his group along the way, those who had just latched on as they were traveling, most of those people left. They weren't trying to stick around. But the actual members of his family, the members of Banu Hashim and the Mawla who were associated with his family, none of them took the offer, none of them left. And so the journey continues. A few days later, while they had stopped to rest, an elderly man came and approached Husayn ibn Ali, and he must have known what was going on in Kufa. He advised Husayn ibn Ali not to go to Kufa. And the old man says something along the lines of, there's nothing there but the tips of spears and swords. And you'll understand what that means, what he's alluding to in just a moment. Well, Husayn ibn Ali, he of course thanks the elderly gentleman, but he continues on towards Kufa anyway. And a few hours later, they spotted the Umayyad advance guard well off in the distance. The advance guard was a group of about 1,000 soldiers from the main Umayyad army, which numbered somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000 soldiers. This was an advance guard to go and head off Husayn ibn Ali before he got too close. Husayn ibn Ali is trapped. Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, the man who's leading this army coming after Husayn ibn Ali, he didn't want to fight Husayn ibn Ali. His family members had advised him not to get involved in this conflict between Banu Hashim and Banu Umayyad. That's kind of like what it boiled down to, two clans fighting each other. We know, of course, that Umar ibn Sa'd was the son of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, one of the 10 people promised paradise, one of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's closest companions, the general who had conquered much of Persia, a former governor of Kufa and Basra and Iraq under Umar ibn al-Khattab, when Umar ibn al-Khattab was caliph. We know that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas has one of the highest ranks from amongst the Sahaba. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas' family members did not want their son, ruining his reputation by fighting against the Prophet's grandson. They didn't want that. So they advised him, don't get involved. But we also know that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, the governor or the viceroy of Iraq, which included both Kufa and Basra and all points beyond that to the east, going into Central Asia, all that was under Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's control. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad had threatened to remove Umar ibn Sa'd as the governor of Ray, which is in Persia, now in Iraq. And Umar ibn Sa'd decided that was more important. His family had told him, it is better for you to give up everything in this world than to go and fight against the Prophet's son. Lose your position, but you'll still have the hereafter. Lose your position in this life, but you'll still have your position in the next life. But Umar ibn Sa'd, he decided that his position was more important, or he felt that he was smart enough to figure a way out of this. That's what I really think it was. I don't think necessarily that Umar ibn Sa'd really wanted to kill or fight Husayn ibn Ali. We know he didn't. I mean, based on the comments, he didn't really want to fight him, but he wasn't strong enough. He didn't have the moral fortitude to stand up to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and just lose his position or say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to fight the Prophet's grandson. I'm not going to fight Ali's son. I'm not doing that. Take my position, I'll eat dates and water. Allah will take care of me. Allah will provide. This is not the same thing, but there are many of us who compromise the deen for the dunya. Many of us do. We work when we're supposed to be going to Jummah. We skip Salat so we can continue working. It happens all the time. Umar ibn Sa'd, he was just playing at a higher level, but he essentially did the same thing. Now, Hussein didn't know any of this. But Umar ibn Sa'd, of course, had scouts tracking Hussein's movements, and for several days now. So Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he was leading this army. He was well aware of how many people were in Hussein's group, what kind of strength he had. He knew what was going on, how far away he was. In fact, some of those people who had come to Husayn ibn Ali to warn him not to go to Kufa had actually been sent by Umar ibn Sa'd because he didn't want Husayn ibn Ali to get close enough to Kufa where he would have to confront him. He was hoping that Husayn ibn Ali would take the hint and head back, but as we know, that did not happen. When that didn't work, that's when Umar ibn Sa'd sent the advance guard to cut off Hussein. As we mentioned, the advance guard consisted of hundreds, perhaps maybe 1,000, no more than 1,000 soldiers. So there was no way that Hussein's small group of only about 150, many of them women and children, there's no way that Hussein's small group stood any sort of chance against this advance guard. And Umar ibn Sa'd was hoping that when Husayn ibn Ali saw that advance guard of 1,000 soldiers, they would take the hint again and realize that, there's no way I can do this. I'm going to head on back to Mecca. At least that's what I believe was Umar ibn Sa'd's purpose for sending that advance guard. Considering the way Umar ibn Sa'd knew this was not the right thing to do, the way he was hoping he wouldn't have to confront Husayn ibn Ali, but considering also that he was too weak to stand up to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, this is like the last chance to prevent an armed conflict against Husayn ibn Ali. This advance guard was led by a man named Hurr ibn Yazid. Umar ibn Sa'd had ordered Hurr ibn Yazid, the captain of this advance guard, to arrest Husayn ibn Ali if he insisted on coming on to Kufa. So this led to a very awkward encounter between Husayn ibn Ali and the advance guard led by Hurr ibn Yazid. Just like Umar ibn Sa'd, Hurr ibn Yazid also did not want to fight Hussein. He was reluctant to arrest Hussein because that would have almost certainly led to physical conflict. So he had his men lined up a short distance from Hussein's group, blocking the road, and they just stayed there while Hussein stayed a good distance away. They just stood there looking at each other, waiting for the other to move until it was time for Salatul Zuhur, which is the midday prayer. And there's an interesting thing. When it was time for Salat, Hussein led them in prayer, everybody, not just his group, but also the advance guard, the Umayyad advance guard. Hussein led them all in prayer, both his followers and the Umayyad soldiers. After the prayer was over, Hurr ibn Yazid, the captain of the advance guard, sat down with Husayn ibn Ali to try to talk this thing out. Husayn ibn Ali laid out his case for why he was marching on to Kufa. He laid down the accusations of Banu Umayyad, of their corruption and their tyranny, and he said that the people of Kufa had begged him to come to Kufa. And that's when he brought out this satchel, like this bag of all of these letters that had come from Kufa begging him to come to Kufa. Hurr ibn Yazid, he's a soldier, he's just following orders. He said he knows nothing about that. He just has orders, and he's to prevent Husayn ibn Ali from getting to Kufa and arrest him if necessary. Of course, Husayn ibn Ali is going to refuse. He's not going to just give in just like that. Instead, after the salat, after the talk, he ordered his followers to gather their belongings. That is, Hussein, he ordered his followers to gather their belongings, that they were going to continue their journey on to Kufa. Now, Hurr ibn Yazid, he had 1,000 armed men. Husayn ibn Ali had at most 150, and then a bunch of women and children as well. They could have, the Umayyad advance guard that was led by Hurr ibn Yazid could have easily overpowered Husayn ibn Ali, but that would have almost certainly led to violence because Husayn ibn Ali and his men, unless Hussein gives them the order, Hussein's followers are not going to go peacefully. They're going to fight to the death or until they can't fight anymore. So there was going to be violence if they tried to arrest them. The Umayyads didn't have tasers or pepper spray to subdue Hussein's followers. The only way to subdue them would have been through fighting, through violence, which would have almost certainly led to bloodshed. But Hurr ibn Yazid, as we mentioned, he didn't want to fight Husayn ibn Ali. He was trying to avoid that. So whenever Hussein moved forward, Hurr ibn Yazid ordered the soldiers to stand in front and block Hussein's party, block their path from continuing forward. So Hussein, we tried to walk around them or go around or find some way around the Umayyad advance guard. Hurr ibn Yazid would move his soldiers a little bit over to block his path. So Hussein tried to go left and Hurr's soldiers moved to block him. Hussein went right and they moved to block him again. When Hussein walked straight, the men marched in the same direction on the opposite side so they could keep track of Husayn ibn Ali. So this continued for several hours, and they're just zigzagging across the desert. Hussein moves, Hurr blocks him. Hussein moves again, Hurr blocks his path again. So Hurr ibn Yazid is forcing Hussein and his party northwest away from Kufa. Remember, they're coming from the southwest, coming from Mecca to Iraq. Try to keep your geography in mind. From Mecca to Iraq. So Hurr kept forcing Hussein northwest away from Kufa until finally Hussein reached a place called Uthayb al-Hijanat, which was a popular watering hole and a grazing area for animals. Once they were there, Hussein found 4 Shiites from Kufa who were also there. These Shiites told Hussein that this was just the advance guard. And so they told Husayn ibn Ali that this was just the advance guard. There was more to this. This 1,000 men was only the beginning. There are another 3,000 to 4,000 off in the distance as you get closer to Kufa. And so they advised Husayn ibn Ali to stop this, go hide in the mountains instead of going on to Kufa. But Hussein refused. He had made a promise to the people of Kufa. He had an appointment with them, and he intended to fulfill that mission. Meanwhile, Hurr ibn Yazid, the captain of the advance guard, he sees that Hussein is not going to back down, so he sends messengers to report back to not just Umar ibn Sa'd, but also to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And I think at that point, that's when things really got worse. If he had just reported only back to Umar ibn Sa'd, maybe the outcome would not have been as tragic as it turned out to be. But that's not what happened. A messenger also went back to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. So now Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is informed of of what is happening right now. Hussein, Umar, and Ubaydullah. So the messenger arrives to Umar ibn Sa'd at the military camp where the main body of the Umayyad army is. Umar ibn Sa'd, he receives Hurr ibn Yazid's message. He decides now he has to go out and march. He wants to go out and march and meet Husayn ibn Ali, hoping that he could arrest Husayn ibn Ali before Ubaydullah got involved. He knows that a messenger was also sent to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. And if Ubaydullah gets involved, all bets are off. There's no telling what's going to happen. This is almost certainly going to have a bad ending. But it was, of course, too late. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad had already received Hurr ibn Yazid's message. And Ubaydullah, he really thought that Umar ibn Sa'd was being too lenient with Husayn ibn Ali. So he sent a messenger back to Hurr ibn Yazid with orders to arrest Hussein. This is now something different. Umar ibn Sa'd had ordered Hurr ibn Yazid and the advance guard to arrest Hussein if he tried to go to Kufa. And Hussein did try to go to Kufa, but they didn't arrest him. But now, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad is ordering him to arrest Husayn ibn Ali no matter what. Just arrest him. So Hurr ibn Yazid, he still doesn't want to arrest Husayn ibn Ali, obviously. He goes out and he rides to Husayn's camp and talks to Hussein personally. And he tells him what his new orders are. So this was his way of trying to warn Husayn ibn Ali that one way or the other, this whole thing was about to come to an end. This is it. He's giving Husayn ibn Ali the opportunity to leave now because now he has the orders from the governor to arrest him. Not just from his military commander, but from the governor. So Hussein, he takes his information, he goes back to meet with the men of his family to discuss what the next move is going to be. Zuhayr ibn Al-Qayn, that's the man who had divorced his wife to join Hussein. He suggests that they relocate to another position. Where they were right now wasn't very defensible. They were exposed. So he suggests they move to a fortified village near the Euphrates River, near the plains called Karbala. Hussein agrees, and the whole group hurries over to this village, and they took up defensive positions within this fortified village near the plains of Karbala by the Euphrates River. Hussein and his followers, they spent the night in this fortified village, and the following day, Umar ibn Sa'd and the remainder of the Umayyad army, about 4,500 men, arrives at Karbala. They know where he is, and so they arrive at Karbala. And so now we get 3 days of negotiations. 3 days of negotiations between Umar ibn Sa'd and Husayn ibn Ali. They're both negotiating mostly through messenger, writing messages back and forth to each other. Umar ibn Sa'd, he initially writes a letter asking Hussein, what do you want? What is it that you're asking for? Hussein writes back and responds that the people of Kufa had invited him to come. But now, this is Hussein still responding to Umar ibn Sa'd. Now, if they do not want him, then he will leave them alone and he will go away. So Umar ibn Sa'd, he's okay with this option. So he writes a letter to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad. He shouldn't have done this. He should have just taken Hussein's offer right then and there. But anyway, he writes to Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad asking if this was acceptable, that Hussein would just turn around and go back home and leave everything alone. Well, Ubaydullah replies with this message. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I have received your letter and I've understood everything you said. Offer Hussein the opportunity for him and his followers to give Amir al-Mu'mineen the bay'ah. If he does that, then we'll think about what comes next. Keep Hussein and his followers away from mortar until they've surrendered. That right there, that single statement right there would cause so many problems for the Ummah in general going forward. That message right there from Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad to Umar ibn Sa'd would cause so many future problems for so many Muslims for centuries to come. In the next episode, inshallah, we will conclude the story of Karbala. But until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You've been listening to the Islamic History Podcast, and we hope you've enjoyed the show. You can support the Islamic History Podcast and get exclusive content by subscribing to our premium channel, Islamic History Exclusive. If you're listening on YouTube, just click the join button to become a member. If you're an Apple or Spotify user, open the app and search for Islamic History Exclusive. If you're listening on Podbean, become a patron in the app and you'll get access to our premium content. You can also join by visiting patreon.com/Islamic History. I'd also like to thank Brother Zulfikar Sirosh for his research and support of the show, and thanks to all of our premium subscribers. Be sure to join the Islamic History Podcast Telegram group where you can download a copy of today's transcript. And finally, subscribe to the Islamic History Podcast on YouTube for our video documentaries. Stay tuned for a short clip from our series on Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. And until next time, my name is Muttaqi Ismail for the Islamic History Podcast. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Islamic History Exclusive. This is the podcast exclusively for Patreon subscribers of the Islamic History Podcast. And in this series, we are going over the life of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, known to the West as Saladin. In this episode, we'll be discussing the Muslim resurgence that began with Imaduddin Zengi and the conquest of Edessa. But before we get into that, let's begin with a quick recap of where we are so far. In the previous episode, we discussed the Battle of Anjer Sanguini, also known as the Field of Blood. In this battle, Il-Ghazi, the Muslim ruler of Aleppo, defeated Roger of Salerno, the ruler of Antioch. This was a devastating defeat as it wiped out most of Antioch's Christian defenses, and this also signified the beginning of a Muslim resurgence. And with that, let's turn to the events leading up to this Muslim resurgence and the rise of Imaduddin Zengi. The Muslim resurgence actually began with the death of Tughtugin, ruler of Damascus in 1128. We mentioned him briefly in episode 4. His death threw Damascus into a state of flux and instability as different factions fought over control of the city. Meanwhile, Imaduddin Zengi, the Turkish ruler who started the Zengid dynasty, was rising to power. Imaduddin Zengi was known to be a brutal and harsh dictator, though perhaps he felt he had to be that way since he was surrounded by both Muslim and Christian enemies. In such an atmosphere, being merciless and cunning might have been a necessity. Despite his cruelty, Imaduddin's emergence marked the beginning of the Muslim revival. His father was executed for treason when Imaduddin was only 10 years old. After that, he was raised by the Muslim ruler of Mosul, Karbala. We briefly mentioned Karbala during the conquest of Antioch when he tried, and failed, to free the city from the Crusaders in 1098. Considering this background, it should not come as a surprise that Zengi eventually became involved in politics himself. In 1122, the Abbasid Caliph made him the governor of Basra and Wasit. Not long after this appointment, the Seljuk Sultan Mahmud II rebelled against the Abbasid Caliph al-Mustarshid. The Seljuks had long controlled the Abbasid Caliphs, and al-Mustarshid was trying to break free from their control. And though he was technically a subordinate, Mahmud II wanted to teach the insolent Caliph a lesson and reassert his authority. Imaduddin Zengi supported Mahmud II in this endeavor, which made him an enemy of the Abbasids. Mahmud II rewarded Zengi for his support by making him governor of Basra in 1126, and then in 1127, Mahmud elevated Zengi to governor of Mosul. And then in 1128, the city of Aleppo submitted to Imaduddin Zengi in return for protection from the Franks. From there, Imaduddin Zengi extended his control all the way south to the city of Homs, which was roughly halfway between Damascus and Aleppo. Ultimately, Imaduddin Zengi wanted to create a kingdom of his own covering all of northern Arabia. He saw himself as a Muslim champion who would drive the Franks out of Muslim lands. But before he could take on the Crusader states in Palestine and Syria, he had to secure Damascus, which was still unstable after the death of Tughtagin. In this state, it was feared that the Franks would attempt to take Damascus for themselves. However, Imaduddin Zengi was hampered in his goals by the fact that his territory was split between Mosul in Iraq and Aleppo in Syria. Whenever he was in one region, he would have to stay for a long time, thereby neglecting the other. To help make up for this, Imaduddin Zengi spent heavily to maintain a solid intelligence network of spies and scouts. And in trying to consolidate and expand his power base, Imaduddin Zengi wound up spending more time fighting other Muslims than he did fighting the Franks.